Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Imagine an HOA hires security to drive past your house every day and photograph your driveway. Then their lawyer starts sending demand letters like you signed some secret contract. My wife thought we were doomed until I took one half-day trip that flipped the whole power dynamic. What did I uncover? This whole mess started about 6 months ago when my wife and I finally found our dream house. After years of apartment living and saving every penny, we were ready to buy our forever home. The house we fell in love with was perfect. It sat on this quiet little street with only 5 other houses, like a peaceful island in the middle of what seemed like endless suburban sprawl. The neighborhood around us was this massive development called something generic, but our little street was different. The houses were older, built in the 1980s, and each one had character. Real character, not the cookie-cutter nonsense you see everywhere else. Our realtor made sure to point out that our street wasn't part of the big development's HOA. She said it explicitly, and the title company confirmed it during closing. We weren't paying any HOA fees, hadn't signed any covenants, and were basically just regular homeowners who could do whatever we wanted with our property within city limits. That was exactly what we wanted. I should probably explain what I do for work. I'm a cabinet maker and woodworker. I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I've built up a pretty solid business making custom pieces for people's homes. I take a lot of pride in my work, and part of that means having the right tools and the right vehicle to get the job done. My work van is a dark gray Ford Transit. It's not some beat-up contractor truck with rust and dents. I keep it clean, well-maintained, and professional-looking. I had tasteful vinyl lettering put on the sides with my business name and phone number. Nothing flashy, just clean and professional. The van represents my business and my livelihood, so I treat it with respect. When we moved into the house, I started parking the van in our driveway off to the side of the garage. It fit perfectly and looked fine. My wife and I were just happy to finally have our own space where we could park whatever we wanted without having to worry about apartment complex rules or landlord approval. For the first 2 months, everything was perfect. We were settling into the house, getting to know our immediate neighbors, and just enjoying being homeowners. Our neighbors were great people, mostly retirees who had lived on the street for decades. They welcomed us warmly and seemed happy to have a young couple bringing some life back to the neighborhood. Then one afternoon in early fall, I came home from a job site to find a white envelope taped to our front door. At first, I thought it might be something from the city or maybe a neighbor wanting to introduce themselves. Boy, was I wrong. Inside was an official-looking document with a header that read, "Violation Notice," in big, bold letters. It was from the HOA of the big development around us. The letter stated that I was in violation of something called Covenant 7.14 for having a commercial vehicle parked in my driveway. There was even a grainy photo of my van attached to it. The notice went on to say that I needed to remove the vehicle immediately or face a fine of $50 per day. It was signed by someone calling herself the compliance officer and had all sorts of official-looking stamps and reference numbers. I actually laughed when I read it. I showed it to my wife and we both just shook our heads. It was obviously a mistake. Some new person in their office probably didn't know the boundaries of their development and assumed our street was part of it. These things happen, right? We figured someone would realize the error and that would be the end of it. I tossed the letter onto the kitchen counter and told my wife not to worry about it. It wasn't our problem, and it would sort itself out once their people figured out what they'd done. A week went by, and I'd pretty much forgotten about the whole thing. Then another letter arrived, this time by certified mail. I had to sign for it, which immediately made me more annoyed than amused. This second letter was nastier. It was titled Second Notice and informed me that I now owed $350 in fines for 7 days of violations. The tone was much sharper, talking about willful noncompliance and continued disregard for community standards. Now I was getting irritated. I called the number on the letterhead and spent 20 minutes on hold before getting transferred to 3 different people. Each person I talked to was polite but completely unhelpful. They kept insisting that their records showed my property was part of their HOA and that I needed to comply with the covenants. When I tried to explain that there had been a mistake, they just repeated their talking points about rules and community standards. The third person I spoke with, who claimed to be some kind of supervisor, told me that if I had questions about my HOA membership, I could attend the next board meeting or submit a formal written request for review. Then she hung up on me. I was starting to realize that this wasn't going to be resolved by a simple phone call. These people were either incredibly incompetent or they genuinely believed they had authority over my property. Either way, I needed to start taking this more seriously. The following Saturday morning, I was outside unloading some materials from my van when I saw someone walking down our street. It was a woman I'd never seen before, probably in her 50s, wearing expensive-looking workout clothes and carrying a clipboard like it was a weapon. She marched right up to my driveway without any greeting or introduction. Her first words to me were accusatory and condescending. She told me that she could see I was still choosing to ignore their notices and asked if I was aware that my fines were now over $400. The way she said it made it clear she thought I was some kind of deadbeat who was trying to get away with something. I set down the lumber I was carrying and tried to be polite. I explained that I thought there had been a mistake because my property wasn't part of their HOA. I told her that my realtor and title company had confirmed this when I bought the house. She actually scoffed at me. She said that everyone tries to claim they're not part of the HOA when they get caught breaking the rules. Then she started lecturing me about property values and community standards. She called my van a truck and said it was an eyesore that was bringing down the whole neighborhood. She told me that the rules exist to protect everyone's investment and that I needed to either park my vehicle in the garage or find an off-site storage facility. When I tried to interrupt and explain again that I wasn't a member of their HOA, she cut me off and said that I'd signed the covenants when I bought the house, whether I remembered it or not. The conversation was short and frustrating. This woman, who I later learned was the HOA president, refused to listen to anything I said. She just kept repeating that the board was very serious about enforcement and that everyone had to follow the same rules. Before she left, she made sure to tell me that the next letter I received would be from their attorney. Then she turned around and marched back toward the main development like she'd just delivered some kind of ultimatum. I stood in my driveway watching her leave, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. My wife had been watching from the window, and when I came inside, she was clearly upset. She asked what we were going to do, and honestly, I didn't have a good answer. That's when things really started to escalate. About a week later, another certified letter arrived. This one was on the letterhead of a law firm and was titled Formal Demand Letter. The tone was completely different from the previous notices. This was serious legal language talking about breach of contract and failure to comply with binding covenants. The letter stated that I now owed over $1,000 in accumulated fines and that if I didn't remove the vehicle and pay the outstanding balance within 10 days, they would pursue all legal remedies available to them. That included the possibility of placing a lien on my property. The threat of a lien genuinely scared me. Even though I knew they were wrong about me being in their HOA, the idea of having a legal cloud over my property was terrifying. My wife and I had worked so hard to buy this house, and now these people were threatening to put some kind of legal claim against it. We started having those awful conversations that couples have when they're facing something that could destroy their financial future. What if they were right and we were wrong? What if there was some paperwork we'd missed? What if our realtor and title company had made a mistake? The uncertainty was killing us, but the legal threats weren't the worst part. A few days after I received the letter from their attorney, I started noticing a private security car driving down our street every day around the same time. The car would slow down as it passed our house, the driver would take a photo of my van, and then it would drive away. It felt like harassment. Here I was on my own property being photographed by some security guard hired by an organization I wasn't even a member of. The whole thing was surreal and intimidating. My wife was getting more and more stressed about the situation. She'd always been the cautious one in our relationship, and this legal uncertainty was really getting to her. She started asking me every day what I was going to do about it, and I could tell she was losing sleep over it. The breaking point came when one of our neighbors mentioned that they'd heard people in the big development talking about the commercial vehicle problem on our street. The story was spreading, and people were starting to look at us like we were troublemakers who were trying to get away with something. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I wasn't going to keep playing defense against people who were harassing me on my own property. If they wanted to escalate this into a legal battle, then I was going to make sure I had all my facts straight and hit back hard. I took a half day off work and went to the county records office. I'd never been there before, but I figured that's where I'd find the official documentation I needed to prove my case. The clerk was helpful once I explained what I was looking for. For $75, I was able to get certified, legally admissible copies of several key documents. First was the official plat map for my subdivision from the 1980s. This document clearly showed the boundaries of our little street and confirmed when it was developed. Second was the official plat map for the big development around us, which showed its boundaries and made it obvious that our street wasn't included. Third, and most importantly, I got a copy of their HOA's founding documents, which listed every single property address that was subject to their covenants and restrictions. My address wasn't on the list. Period. End of story. Armed with these documents, I went home and spent the evening crafting my response. I wasn't going to hire a lawyer yet, but I was going to make sure my letter was professional, factual, and absolutely devastating to their case. I addressed the letter to their board of directors and copied their attorney. The tone was polite but firm, and I made sure every statement was backed up by official documentation. In the first paragraph, I acknowledged receiving their various letters and violation notices regarding my work van. I was specific about dates and reference numbers to show that I'd been keeping detailed records of their harassment. The second paragraph was where I laid down the hammer. I stated clearly and unequivocally that my property had never been subject to their covenants and that their attempts to enforce their rules on a non-member were unlawful. I didn't use emotional language or make personal attacks. I just stated the facts. The third paragraph listed all the evidence I'd gathered. I told them I was attaching certified copies of the county plat maps and their own founding documents, which irrefutably proved that my property wasn't part of their association. The fourth paragraph was my list of demands. I wanted three things: a formal written apology and confirmation that all alleged violations and fines had been removed from their records, an immediate end to all contact including letters and surveillance, and a guarantee that any further harassment would result in me pursuing legal action for damages. But the fifth paragraph was my masterpiece. This was where I turned their own bureaucratic nature against them. I pointed out that I documented every piece of correspondence, every certified letter, every legal threat, and every daily patrol by their security contractor. I noted that their board had clearly wasted a considerable amount of their members' dues on a frivolous and baseless campaign against a private citizen. Then I suggested that they provide a full accounting of these wasted funds to their paying members at their next meeting. I was basically telling them that not only were they wrong, but they'd been spending their members' money on illegal harassment, and those members deserved to know about it. I sent the letter via certified mail with return receipt requested to both their main office and their law firm. I used their own preferred communication method against them, and I made sure I'd have proof that they received it. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The daily security patrols stopped the next day. The threatening letters stopped coming. For 10 days, there was complete silence from their side. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. It wasn't the hostile HOA president who'd confronted me in my driveway. Instead, it was a very nervous-sounding man who identified himself as their treasurer. He was falling all over himself to apologize, calling the whole thing a deeply regrettable administrative error and a terrible misunderstanding. He assured me that all fines had been dropped and the matter was closed. He promised that I'd receive written confirmation within a few days, and he personally guaranteed that there would be no further contact from their association. The written confirmation arrived exactly as promised, and it was everything I demanded in my letter. They formally acknowledged that my property wasn't subject to their covenants. They apologized for the administrative error, and they confirmed that all violation notices and fines had been expunged from their records. But the real satisfaction came a few weeks later when one of my neighbors filled me in on what had happened behind the scenes. This neighbor was friends with someone who lived in the big development, and the story had spread like wildfire through their community. Apparently, my letter had caused chaos at their next board meeting. The treasurer had been forced to read it aloud to the entire board, and the revelation that they'd been spending association funds on a costly and illegal campaign against a non-member had caused an uproar. The board members were furious about the wasted money and the legal exposure they'd created for the association. Several members demanded to know how much they'd spent on attorney fees and security patrols for this bogus enforcement action. The HOA president who'd confronted me was completely humiliated. She'd led the charge against me, convinced that she was protecting property values and enforcing important rules. Instead, she'd exposed the association to potential liability and wasted thousands of dollars of member funds on a campaign that was illegal from the start. The story spread through their community, and by the time of their annual election, everyone knew about the work van incident. The president was voted off the board by a landslide, with many residents citing her reckless and arrogant leadership as their reason for opposing her. The new board was much more careful and respectful. They implemented new procedures to verify property boundaries before sending any violation notices, and they made it clear that they understood the limits of their authority. Several months have passed since this whole ordeal ended, and I'm happy to report that the peace and quiet we wanted when we bought this house has been completely restored. I still park my work van in the same spot in my driveway, and it's never looked better. The silence from the HOA has never sounded so sweet, and every morning when I see that van parked exactly where it belongs, I'm reminded that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself when people try to push you around. I never wanted a fight with anyone. All I wanted was to live peacefully in my own home and run my business without interference from people who had no authority over me. But when they pushed me into a corner and threatened my property with their baseless legal claims, I had no choice but to push back. The whole experience taught me that bullies often back down when you stand up to them with facts and documentation. They were counting on me being intimidated by their official-looking letters and legal threats, but once I did the research and armed myself with the truth, their entire case collapsed. My wife and I learned a valuable lesson about the importance of keeping detailed records and not backing down when you know you're right. We also learned that sometimes the best defense is a good offense, especially when you're dealing with people who abuse their authority. To this day, I still wave politely to the new HOA president when I see her driving through the neighborhood. She always waves back, and there's a mutual respect there that never existed with the old leadership. It's amazing how much more reasonable people become when they understand the limits of their power and the consequences of overstepping those boundaries. The whole situation could have been avoided if they'd simply checked their records before sending that first violation notice. But their arrogance and assumption that they could intimidate me into compliance turned a simple administrative error into a major embarrassment for their organization. I'm proud of how I handled the situation. I stayed calm, relied on facts rather than emotions, and used their own bureaucratic procedures against them. I never resorted to threats or personal attacks. I just presented the truth in a way that they couldn't ignore or dispute. The victory wasn't just about keeping my van in my driveway. It was about establishing that private citizens have rights that can't be trampled by organizations that think they're above the law. It was about showing that regular people can fight back against institutional bullying and win. Looking back, I'm actually grateful for the whole experience. It showed me that I could stand up for myself and my family when the stakes were high. It proved that doing your homework and presenting facts in a professional manner is more effective than getting angry or giving up. Most importantly, it restored my faith in the idea that justice can prevail when good people refuse to be intimidated by those who abuse their power. My work van is still parked in the same spot, my business is thriving, and my family feels safe and secure in our forever home. The HOA learned a very expensive lesson about the importance of knowing their boundaries, both literally and figuratively. And I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. As I write this, I can see my van through the window, parked exactly where it belongs in my own driveway. Tomorrow morning, I'll load it up with tools and materials for another custom cabinet job, and I'll drive off to work knowing that nobody has the right to tell me where I can park on my own property. The whole experience reinforced my belief that America is still a place where individuals can stand up to institutional power and win, as long as they're willing to do the work and fight for what's right. My little victory against an overreaching HOA might not change the world, but it certainly changed my world for the better. And every time I see that perfectly parked work van in my driveway, I'm reminded that sometimes the best revenge is simply being right and having the courage to prove it. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work as a cashier in a supermarket. I mentally scream every single shift because people really stress me out these days, but alas, I can pay my bills. My workplace has a ton of rules, some stupid, some not. For example, we have a minimum of $5 per card transaction. Yes, ma'am, even Apple Pay. But personally, I gotta say I only follow that rule when a manager is around. Or if the client is a real jerk. You understand. There's a rule that I do understand. We cashiers can't accept a huge amount of loose change or change rolls without a manager's approval. We can totally accept something like $4 in just quarters, but not that same amount in just dimes and cents. We have a Coinstar machine literally steps away for that. Well, guess what happened some days ago? This oldish lady who couldn't even grant me a good evening wanted to give me her whole total in quarters, dimes, nickels, and cents. Her total was about $12 with some cents, so I couldn't definitely accept it. I explained the rules, what I stated before, and even offered her help to manage the machine, but she refused and said that money is money, you're just being a lazy idiot because you probably don't even know how to count. I stood there, mentally insulting her, but physically still smiling, staring at her. She sighed and fetched a 20 from her purse, but stopped. This lady suddenly had a huge grin, put the bill in her purse again, gave me a 10 and $3 in nickels, dimes, and quarters. You explained the maximum was 4, right? Now I wanted to scream, but I remained calm. I simply sighed and admitted defeat until I had the brightest idea. I was supposed to give her 67 cents in return, and I made sure to open the roll of cents I had. Slowly, I counted and gave her whole change in just cents. She scoffed and asked me, "What the duck is all this?" My answer, with a huge customer service smile, I just answered, "Money is money, right?" She just dumped it all in her purse, grabbed her stuff, and walked away fuming. The next one is an entitled people story. My sister herself is a terrible driver. I've spoken at length about how she'd drink and drive, how she's a leadfoot, texts while driving, etc. She'd drive a minivan 70 in a 35 zone with kids in the car and say the kids loved it because it was like a roller coaster. She even scared her eldest son by driving so fast that his hat blew off, and he didn't have his head out the window. He was scared to even open the window of other vehicles while riding with other people for a while. But my sister is just as bad as a ride-along, because she's either a backseat driver, gives terrible directions, drunk, or insults your driving. And for the record, I wanted to report her bad driving to the police. But my family went off on me for even having the idea, which is the only reason I never did. I currently don't know where my sister lives, or if she even has a car. She's a drug addict, not exactly swimming in money, and her eldest son is an adult now. And yes, I'm aware I should have still done something. I've been called a coward, and I owned up to that. But my sister had us all mentally beaten down for years, and used her kids as emotional blackmail, but now she can't do that anymore. Let's start with seatbelts. My nephews for a while had a bad habit of ripping their seatbelts off as soon as their destination was in sight. I'd have them in my car, and as soon as they could see home off in the distance, they ripped their seatbelts off. I got mad at them several times and always forced them to rebuckle till we were parked. They'd give me grief, say it was no big deal, etc. But I held firm. You ride with me, the belts stay on till we are parked. After this happened several times, they finally got the memo and stopped doing it. They wouldn't tell me where they learned it from, though. I thought it might have been their father. But nope, it turned out to be my sister. I was driving her home, and as soon as home was in sight, she ripped her seatbelt off. And I went off on her for doing it, and setting a bad example for her kids. She called me dramatic and tried to act like it was no big deal. But I didn't let it go, and hammed her till she said she'd never do it again. She did, but I hammered her again until she stopped. My sister absolutely could not stand anyone driving slow when riding with them. Every freaking time she'd ride with me, unless she was zoned out on her phone, she'd complain about me driving too slow. I'm sorry, I was going the speed limit. She twice debated how fast I should be driving through a school zone. The zone was 20 miles per hour on weekdays from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., unless it was weekends or summer. But when school was not active, it was 40 miles per hour through that zone. I slowed down to exactly 40, and my sister started demanding I go 45 and claimed it was 45 through there. And she refused to believe me when I said it was 40. Thankfully, the school zone had more than one sign, and I pointed to one that said 40 on it, and she pouted and shut up. This situation actually happened a second time. My sister would act grateful for rides, but then would either distract you and think it was funny when you get mad, or insult your driving. Once when I was driving my nephews in her home, her arm shot out in front of my face and she yelled, "Deer!" Scared the crap out of me. And she thought it was hilarious, even though I could have lost control of the car. I went off on her and she forced out an insincere apology. Thankfully, she never did that again. Even though my sister is a terrible driver, a leadfoot, neglectful of her own vehicles, guilty of multiple accidents and a DUI, she always criticized my driving. Once I forgot to use my turn signal when pulling into a parking lot, even though I carefully slowed down. She went off on me about the turn signal. Never mind, I had her and 3 very distracting kids in the car, and then after I pulled into the parking lot, she pointed at me and said to her kids, "You see, I'd never forget to do that." The only reason I didn't go off on her was because the kids were there. Then there was my sister giving directions. She was fine if she wasn't drunk or distracted. Once, when she paid me to drive her and her friends out bar hopping, when it was time to go home, my sister insisted I take her way on the back roads. And I kept telling her the main road with practically no traffic on it was faster at night. But no, she had to have her way. She got us lost in a maze of neighborhoods. Once I figured out where the main road was again, I headed for that, and she threw a tantrum because I wasn't going her way. We got on the main road and sailed right on out in less than a minute, and she kept complaining her way would have been faster. Then there was when she ended up homeless after burning nearly all friend and family bridges. I was driving her and all her stuff to the place she was allowed to crash for a couple days, and she kept zoning out on her phone and wouldn't look up to give me directions till the absolute last second. And I had to yell at her to look up and tell me where to go. And then she'd get mad and say she was busy. Like I could just automatically know where to go without her. She put me through days of that crap. It was about that time I went NC with her. Then there was driving her while she was drunk. Now that was a nightmare. Once she and her husband both got drunk, and I had to drive her and her entire family home. As soon as we were all in the car and I'd backed out, she suddenly grabbed my shifter and shifted it into drive with a big grin on her face. Then was angry I was mad at her for doing it. She acted like it was no big deal, and I should have been grateful she did it. She apologized later, but I kinda doubt it was genuine, and she probably just didn't want to lose her emergency brother taxi. Then of course was her drunken backseat driving, which I explained in the above paragraph. And then there was the time she drove to work in the morning drunk. She worked 2 miles away at the time. She had to call me and beg me to come get her because her boss was sending her home since she showed up drunk, and her boss wasn't letting her drive herself back. I confronted her about why she was drunk in the morning and went to work like that, and she admitted to me that she just doesn't like being told what to do. I told her that when you have a job, being told what to do is par for the course, unless you're the boss. Which she was not. She just looked bitter and got out of my truck. The last major incident I drove her while she was drunk, she had a friend with her and we stopped at her friend's place because her friend wanted to have a sleepover at my sister's place, and they just wanted to pick up some clothes. I waited in my truck for 45 minutes before finally going in to get them. I caught them sitting on the floor with a bottle of booze, and my sister looked up at me like she'd just been caught by a parent. They just decided to get more wasted while I was waiting for them. My sister couldn't even tell she wasn't at home, and kept talking about the carpet. I had to forcibly drag her out and throw her in my truck and buckle her myself. Then on the way home, she unbuckled to have a slapping play fight with her friend in the back seat, climbed over the center console, shoved her butt in my face, and then literally got stuck between the back seat and center console, so I had to pull her out. And then she kept trying to walk to the road and say home was that way, so I had to drag her into her trailer, throw her onto her bed, and tell her I was done before going home. I went off on her the next day, and made her and her friend reimburse me for wasted gas of letting my truck idle for nearly an hour waiting for them. Then there was the crap my sister would say while drunk. She used to pay me to drive her out to bars, and she'd say we'd be out by 10 or 11, and would somehow push it to 1 a.m. She has no consideration for being on someone else's time, and acted like I was a killjoy for wanting to go home. But on one of the last times I drove her to a bar before she had her boyfriend take over, she suddenly started bawling while wasted and literally told me she was just waiting for our mother to die and no one would be playing Ozzy at her funeral. And right around the time I cut her off after driving her around for days, she told me our mother was going to die for crossing her because apparently a few people she'd been wronged by passed away. But after years of her saying and doing crap like that, I finally snapped and blocked her on everything about a year ago. And my life has been much better since. The next one is an entitled parent story. The park is not your free babysitter. It is a public space and you still have to parent your kid while there. When you don't, it ruins public spaces for everyone else. Husband and I took our daughter to the park. There were 2 women there with their kids playing. At our park, there is 3 separate playgrounds, and we always try to take our daughter to an empty one if possible because she is only 1.5 and kind of slow moving on the equipment, and we know that can be annoying to older kids wanting their turns. That's what we did this time, and the group of kids followed us to the playground, which happens a lot, and we are totally okay with it. Our baby loves watching older kids go down the slide, etc. We will usually get on the equipment with her to make sure she doesn't fall off the top of the slide or do something crazy since she's so little. Especially when other kids are playing so we can help her along quicker and the other kids can get their turns. One of the boys was probably about 4 to 5 years old, was being super aggressive and literally trying to force past us to go down the slide while we were trying to help our daughter take her turn. We were literally having to block him from bulldozing her with our bodies, and he was pushing and shoving us. We both were saying stuff like, "We have to take turns. Don't push me. Keep your hands to yourself." The moms were close by but did nothing. We decided to take our daughter to one of the other empty playgrounds, and as soon as we are on our way, he starts running to the same playground. I turn around and go to a different playground. He follows us around 4 times, doing the same thing each time, wanting the specific slide our daughter is going down, being pushy, putting his hands on us. Finally, we are at the top of one of the taller slides, and he is literally shoving my husband and I both. We are trying to keep him off of our daughter, and he's arguing with us, telling us to let him through, etc. We are saying, "Keep your hands to yourself, it's not your turn," etc. At this point, it is unsafe for my daughter. I'm tired of the mom just ignoring this. I ask the kid who his mom is. He tells me, I yell to the mom that her kid is literally shoving us and won't stop. The mom looks at me and says, "Okay." I'm mad at this point. I go down the slide with my baby and she walks over to me and says, "He's been tested for autism multiple times, so maybe consider that before you get an attitude about it." I basically told the lady that I'm sorry they are going through that, but I do not care what he has going on. His behavior is unacceptable. This woman proceeds to just act like I'm being crazy for saying anything to her, says stuff like, "You need to understand he's autistic. He's a kid and you are at the park." I stand firm saying, "I don't care. He can't put his hands on me or my baby." I ask her would she be okay with some kid following her around, shoving her literal baby around. She asks me how many times he's put his hands on us and suggests that next time I let her know the first time it happens. She does not tell her child to stop. She doesn't address it with him. Just keeps repeating to me he's autistic. I don't know what to tell you. I am just beyond frustrated and lose my cool a little and told the mom if her kid has so many issues she is aware of, maybe she needs to be a little more active in her parenting when she's in public with other kids around, and that I feel bad for her son. We left the park after that, but I genuinely could not believe that happened. I am a pediatric RN, and I have so much compassion for kids with all types of disabilities, but it is so crazy to claim that your child should just get to do whatever he wants and put his hands on strangers just because he is autistic. If I had a child that struggled like that, I would be paying very close attention to keep my child safe. You never know how a stranger or another child is going to react to your kid getting physical with them. I'm all for accommodations, but I will not enable behavior like that, especially when it's directed at my child. I genuinely don't care what circumstances you have going on. Your kid does not get to repeatedly put their hands on other people. Just because your child is possibly neurodivergent doesn't mean you are entitled to let them do whatever they want and put their hands on people. What it does mean is you are more than likely going to have to work harder and be more active than the typical parent. Is it fair? No. But those are the cards you are dealt. I don't know where this sense of entitlement came that everyone just has to deal with your kids' aggressive behavior in public, but PSA, I'm not enabling that kind of tomfoolery. If you don't want people to catch an attitude, get off your lazy butt and actively watch and parent your kid. Anyway, thank you for watching.